Hi everyone, I'm Joanna Penn from thecreativepenn.com and today I'm here with Bob Mayer. Hi Bob.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to finally have you on the show. So just as an introduction, Bob is a West Point graduate, a former Green Beret, the CEO of Cool Gus Publishing, and a New York Times bestselling author with 60 books published. Bob has sold over 4 million books and is also a leadership speaker and consultant. So, and one of the sort of indie, I don't want to say gurus, Bob, but you are a bit of a guru.
Okay, not fond of the term guru, but that's okay.
Well, we'll say you are our sort of Green Beret leader. How's that?
Okay, that works.
Yeah, that works. So just on that, I am absolutely fascinated with your military background, and one of the big things about the military, I guess, is discipline. And you know, with 60 books, that's just amazing. And one thing all writers chase is this daily word count goal. And I wondered if you could, give us some recommendations around discipline for the indie life.
I think every author is different. I don't think you can have a rule and apply it to someone else. Also, I hate to say it, but authors lie. I've listened to authors make presentations who I know, and they're saying, "Oh, I do this and I do that," and I'm going, "No, you don't." Because we feel guilty about making a living just sitting in front of our computer and inventing stories. I definitely know authors who are very fixated on, 3,000 words a day, X number of pages, this and that. But for most of us, I think it's a creative process. So I just go with the flow. The biggest thing is you have to just sit there and do it. At the bottom line, the hardest thing about being a writer is writing. Everything else is great, but you have to. My rule is you got to put the time in.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you say authors lie because you do write about that on the blog and in some of your books for authors. Do you think that also the booksellers lie and the bestseller list lie and it's all just this smoke and mirrors thing? It just seems that people actually sell fewer books than it seems they do.
I definitely know. I know for a fact. I know agents over-report their deals and publishers lunch because they take the agent's word out. And I know agents who have over-reported deals by $500,000.
Mm.
I think the sales figures are inflated. Everybody's kind of nobody, and I think that's a problem because then your authors are looking around going, "Well, everybody's doing better than I am," and the reality is they're not. They're just saying they're doing better than you are. I know that the churn on the list on Amazon and the other online platforms is so much faster now than it used to be. And yes, certainly there's a handful of people who have consistent great sales, but for the rest of us, it's up and down fast now.
Mm.
So I kind of take everything I hear with a grain of salt. I also noticed that indie authors are publishing less numbers than we did in the golden days of indie, where it was 1,000 ebooks a day and this and that. And I think pretty much across the board, everybody's numbers are down.
And do you see that as a representative of just that there's more people in the market?
Yeah, it's the unlimited book shelf space. I mean, it's a good news, bad news. We're happy that we have distribution. The problem is we have distribution. Every book that's ever been published is on a shelf now. More are getting added every day, and none of them are getting taken away. John Fine from Amazon called it a tsunami, but that's the wrong term because the tsunami recedes.
Mm.
This is a flood that is not going away.
Mm. And you say that, and I just saw Barbara Cartland's entire backlist, going up on ebook, something like 400
Yep.
books from a name author in romance. And we can't. I mean, that's hard to compete with. But what do you see as the best way to manage this? Let's call it just river, I guess, since you have rivers in your branding.
I don't think there is a way to manage it. Our motto is always the best marketing is good content, and better marketing is more good content. One thing I am doing a little differently, I'm finishing up a book this week, one of my Amazon 47 North books. And then after that, I'm going to write 3 or 4 shorts because I can write 3 or 4 shorts in the time it takes me to write a novel. 3 or 4 books out there gives you that much more exposure than just putting another novel out. But it really does come down to content. You got to have content, but also the people who are selling really well have great word of mouth among readers.
Which takes time to build,
Yeah.
obviously. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and the other thing, I was interested because I interviewed Colin Falconer, one of
Hmm.
your authors, and also in your book, Write It Forward, you say niche is the future, focusing on a brand, and you have the Atlantis brand, which is awesome, and some other ones. What are your sort of guidelines around that?
Well, it's interesting. Colin, today we did a BookBub ad on him yesterday, and last I checked, he was in the top 50 on Amazon. He was the top 15 on Apple, so selling really well. But we also know that goes away in 2, 3 days. But the last time we did it with him, with Isabella, his sales overall just rose and stayed up there. So we're hoping to see that again. One thing I'm doing is it's like I've had a 25-year plan. The book I'm finishing right now, my Night Stalkers books, I've wrapped into that my Cellar series, and I'm wrapping in my Atlantis series now into it. So when people get to the end of this book in November, it says, if you want to know more about these characters, they're in a 6-book series called Atlantis. If you want to know about these characters, they're in a 2-book series called Cellar. I'm trying to consolidate everything so the books cross over among themselves.
Mm. And when you do that, do you have a very clear idea of your target customer? Because you do span quite a big sort of, I guess, rainbow of niches.
Well, that is probably the biggest mistake I made in my career, was not picking one niche, running 60 books inside of that. I'd probably be doing a lot better, but I just wrote whatever I felt like it. Mm. And I'm still going to write whatever I feel like it. Yeah. I'm able to do that because I have so many titles. But I would recommend for a new author, just pick one series. I mean, I was talking with Bella Andre, and I was kind of joking. I said, how many Sullivan books are there going to be? And she was in all serious. She said 26. Yeah. I mean, she's like, this works. My readers want this family. I'm going to keep writing inside that family.
And how do we balance that, like writing what we want to write versus running a business?
Yeah, you shouldn't. You shouldn't do what I'm doing, is what I tell people. But I think also, though, you give yourself more chances. If you have not had that great breakout, that book or that series that takes off, to keep beating to death a series that's doing okay but not great, it's really hard if the 12th book in the series is going to explode off the charts. It'd be nice to think that. You know, my 8th book in my Green Beret series, I thought was a fantastic book. Readers loved it, but I did not necessarily see the crossover into the entire series of sales. So I call it, you can either do the sniper approach, where you tried one shot for everything, or the shotgun approach, where you try 20 shots and hoping one hits.
And I think I'm at this point of not really knowing what do you call a successful series. I mean, I've got 3 full length and 2 novellas, and I want to do more. I don't know when when do you make a decision, like when's a series working or not?
I don't think you can make that decision, because you don't know when the magic moment is. I do believe there's a certain tipping point where things just start working. And you look at everybody tries to explain how some of these series that have been very successful work. If they knew how to do it, it's the old, lie in publishing. Why isn't every book a bestseller? We only want to publish bestsellers. No one knows what makes it. My wife and I were talking about that, where it's just like, what is it about this book that just, we've read much better books than this certain book, but it just resonates with readers somehow. And I do think that's something you can't market, you can't encapsulate, you can't even teach it. You can teach the craft of writing, but I don't think you can. Terry Brooks, his book on writing is called Sometimes the Magic Works, and sometimes it does.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, just to get into your books for writers, because you have a number and they're all fantastic, and I recommend everybody gets them. Now, in Write It Forward, you say that when you run workshops, and I quote, less than 10% of writers have a clear idea of where they want to be in 5 years' time, which I find so interesting. So how do you advise that writers go about making a decision about 5 years' time?
Well, there's no decision. I think you just have to say, where really it comes down to one thing right now. And it's the same thing that was in traditional publishing. My first book came out in 91. The first conference I ever went to, I roomed with a guy who had just won the Edgar Award for Best Mystery Paperback. So he thought his career was made. It was his second book, he was like, wow, that's great. He didn't last 2 years. I watched a lot of people fall by the wayside, and nowadays, more so than ever, the only person that can stop a writer is themselves. They're going to quit because the distribution is there. You don't have an agent looking at you saying, no, I don't like the book. I mean, it used to be you need your agent, you need your editor, you need your publisher, you need the bookseller, you need the book buyer, you need the bookstore to get to the reader. You don't need any of those people now. So it's you to the reader. So the people who are saying no are the readers. And that's the people you have to convince that it's worthwhile to spend money to buy your book.
But when people are formulating that 5 years time goal, I guess for me, I think about, because I gave up my other career where I earned X amount. For me, there is a financial goal around, a 5-year plan of I should be making this amount, therefore I need to write this many books. Is
Right.
that a way to break it down logically?
Yes, and I think you have to have multiple revenue streams. When we started Cool Gus, part of our plan was I was going to go with Amazon's imprint. Even though I run my own publishing company, we gave the Area 51 series to Amazon, and I signed a new series deal with them. And the reason we did that is we knew we needed that marketing that Amazon brings to the table. So you can literally break down, and we do that. We say, how much do we have to make per month? How much is our overhead going to be? Like a real business does. The problem is that's all nice and well, but you can do everything you can to control that, but you can't make it happen. The only thing you can make happen is the writing.
Yeah, exactly. Although in general now it does seem the more books you have, if you have a trickle of money per book, you're obviously going to make more.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I guess, thinking about, you mentioned people falling by the wayside there. Do you think that burnout is a problem right now with sort of speed becoming more of an issue, I guess?
I don't know how some of these people want to keep it up. I mean, they're tremendously hard workers. I know quite a few of the top indie authors, but can they keep it up for 5, 10 years? Putting out 3, 4. I mean, I've been putting out 3 books a year for 20 years, but I think the pressure is just tremendous now. And the problem is, it's nice being indie, but you're also on your own. And I think so many indie authors are starting to see that. They're starting to see they're on their own and they sink or swim on their own. And they don't have a team. And one of the reasons I formed Cool Gus was I wanted a team. I wanted just more than me to count on to do things. Plus, as a publisher, we're helping other authors, but we also get an income stream from those other authors.
Mm. And I'm fascinated with Cool Gus, and I've seen you and Jen speak. Could you talk a bit more about how you manage the business between you and Jen?
It's pretty simple. She handles pretty much all the technical aspects, the marketing aspects. I noticed Bella Andre in an interview after BEA said she needed a COO. She was the CEO of her company, but she was the company. And I emailed her. I said, that's funny because on Jen's card it says COO, Chief Operating Officer, because basically we discuss things, we make decisions together. She probably sent me 10 emails this morning going, what do we do? Do we want to do first in series free with a new series we're launching on Apple and Kobo and Barnes and Noble? Do we want to do this? And we make the decision together. But ultimately, she's pretty much the one who implements everything.
And it's funny because I look at her and I want one too. I would love, a Jen. I think everyone wants a Jen now. But do you think that there is going to be a change in what we used to call agents, as in what Jen does is partly what an agent used to do, surely?
I don't think she does what an agent used to do. Agents used to just sell rights. I know like Kristen Nelson has started up her own publishing arm, but I think there's a huge difference. I actually see agents as an endangered species. Are we going to need to sell rights? The big trend I noted at BEA this year was a lot of the indie authors. I mean, I talked to Hugh Howey, and he said he doesn't know any indie author who signed a traditional deal, including himself, with his print deal signed who was happy with that deal, who was happy with the way it turned out. And I could have told him that because it's that pie in the sky thing they promise you with traditional publishing, and then they just fail to deliver. So I see more of those authors going completely into not hybrid anymore. I mean, I almost think the hybrid concept is dying out. They see no reason to be hybrid. So kind of what do you need an agent for? Well, foreign rights right now, but I'd be leery of selling my foreign rights right now because if we have the distribution into the digital into those countries, do you want to give up that control for 7 years?
Yeah, and I wanted to come back on that actually. But in terms of what you talked about, seeing Hugh Howey and Bella at BEA, and it sounds like it was amazing. I'm wondering, are you hearing anything new though? I mean, do you feel like we've really stabilized as a sort of indie community, or what do you see as what's new coming through?
Last year, the big buzz out of BEA was everything's stable, and I still see it from traditional publishing. They act like, oh, we've weathered the digital storm, everything's fine now. And I don't think anything can be further from the truth. I think the turmoil is going to get worse. I see indie authors very leery of signing a traditional deal now, even if there's a lot of money put on the table. I know Liliana Hart was talking about turning down 7-figure deals from traditional publishers. I think traditional publishers are still very naive. It just amazes me that they seem to think the business model as it is right now is going to continue as it is right now. And the facts of the matter is there's less and less physical shelf space. Barnes & Noble is in trouble. There's only so long they can live off the digital margin that they're making on their best-selling authors till somebody's going to start saying, I want to make more money. You're not producing any product. The thing that shocked me, I guess I've been out of traditional publishing somewhere, it sounds like a lot of the deals now are net, not gross. I used to get a gross off the cover price. And I'm hearing people say now, no, the deals they're signing are net. And net to me is an extraordinarily dangerous term. I would never sign a contract that said net returns because you can deduct anything, man, out of the author slice. I mean, I was looking at all the big banners at BEA and going, those are $30,000 a piece. And a lot of authors paid for that. Not that author. A lot of the other authors at that publishing company paid for that banner.
Yeah. And if people listening don't really know what that means, like in terms of net, you said things can be deducted. A banner is one example.
Costs, yes.
Yeah, so costs are deducted from that. So you end up with, instead of 30,000, you might get 5,000 or something. You just don't know. That's the point.
Yes, you get shocked when you see, like we're running that ad for Colin today. Well, we pay for that. If we were running net, we would deduct that from his royalties, and that's not the way I don't think that's fair to the author to start deducting things because then they'd have to get into your books to see, are you treating me fairly?
And it's
if you give them straight the royalty statements from Amazon or whatever, and they can look at it and they know they're getting a percentage of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I wonder if that, you said about Liliana, and I've met her, she's, brilliant. And is it that indies are actually having fun as well? I mean, everyone's working hard, but is this fun, the control?
I think it is. I mean, I've been in publishing for 25 years, and this is the best time ever because we do have control. And I think that's a key word. I think if you look at, I just did a blog post where I mentioned, 5 years ago, #1 New York Times bestselling author had dinner with her, and she said, should I worry about this ebook thing, this digital stuff? And I said, nah. And if I had that dinner today, I would say, oh yeah. And the biggest thing I would say is they're making great money, a lot of those authors, but I think some big name author is going to go indie soon for control. So they can sit there and go, you know what? I want to write what I want to write. I don't want to have to get an approval of my agent. I want to put the cover on it I want. I want to put the prices on it I want. I mean, I still find it weird, James Patterson, Scott Turow, Malcolm Gladwell, all complaining about Amazon, yet their books are for sale on Amazon, and they have absolutely no control over that. I have absolute control over where my books are sold. I get to choose what price. I get to choose everything. Our authors, we always give our authors final say on everything. They get to choose that.
Do you think that this is partly a personality thing? I mean, you've obviously got you test things, you change your mind, you seem quite happy to go, I used to think that, now I think this. And is it a personality thing to be a successful indie?
Yeah, it is. I think there's some authors who are very successful with traditional publishing, but they would not fare well as an indie author because they wouldn't want to make all the decisions. They would not want to. So what they would have to do if they did is they'd have to trust somebody. Then you start getting into dangerous territory of this COO model where I think you have to have one point of contact like I do with Jen, and I trust Jen to do things. But I definitely know if there's a lot of traditional authors I talk to, and they end up finally saying, I'm too afraid. I'm too afraid. I like that known advance check. I like that known entity of that publisher doing things for me, even though they take an inordinate amount of money. I need my agent handling one of the biggest mistakes I made in my traditional publishing career, and I think authors still make, is thinking their agent handles their business. Agent cannot do a business model for you. The agent can assist you, but you got to do your own business model and come up with your own goals.
And you mentioned multiple streams of income and your own business model. That includes speaking and consulting as well, right? What does your business model look like?
ACX. I was early in on ACX. Matter of fact, they laugh there. They say they have Bob's team there because I introduced Bella Andre to them, and they're very happy about that. ACX, a nice income stream. I also run workshops here at my house on the river. We call it Right on the River, where we bring 4 people in for the weekend. Speaking, I do consulting. It's not a priority for me, but when people ask me, like I just did a conveyor belt company in Chicago. I went in and spoke to them about goal setting and leadership and things like that. So I'm always open. I call myself a publishing whore. I say yes to pretty much everything, but most things in publishing don't work out. I always say for 50 things I say yes to, 1 thing pays off.
which is interesting, and that saying no thing, that's a challenge, isn't it? Because you're obviously very high profile these days.
Yeah, the only power I always say I'm a whore. I say yes to everything, but no, I don't. I do say no to things because that's the only true power an author has is to say no. No agent is better than a bad agent. No deal is better than a bad deal. Amazon offered me last year to do a cereal, and I just wasn't keen on the idea, and I said no to them. I mean, I turned down money on the table, and in retrospect, I'm glad I did because it wouldn't have worked out well. I do think there are times authors just simply have to say, I got to look long term. I can't go for the immediate dollar. I've got to look 2-3 years down the line how this is going to work out.
Mm. And I wondered about because I've read a bits of your stuff where you say you're quite, obviously you're a writer, you're a quiet guy. Do you call yourself an introvert?
Yeah, I am. And that's a big problem for most authors. We are introverts, so it's very hard. I remember I did a presentation at the National Speakers Association in San Francisco, and it was the exact opposite of a gathering of writers. It was all extroverts. It was everybody talking business, passing business cards around, talking about money, bottom line. A writer's conference is the exact opposite. Everybody's standing in a corner. Nobody's talking about business. Nobody's talking about money. But we have to. We have to start talking about those things.
Mm. So are you a member of NSA? Because I'm one too.
No, I didn't. I didn't end up joining because I don't do enough gigs with them.
Yeah, no, I felt exactly the same. I would go along and it would just be so loud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
it's totally opposite.
yeah, so just come back on global. So I've just put a book out in German, and it's been hell, absolute hell, to be honest. And what do you see as the future with foreign rights? Is it indie publishing, or is it selling those rights?
It's hard to say. Right now, you're probably better off selling the rights. I'm trying to remember Tina Folsom, but
She's German.
she's German, so she makes more money in Germany. I think if you don't speak the language and you don't have a presence in country, it's really difficult. The other problem is it's such a tiny part of the foreign marketplace right now. But I look at in 2010, 4 years ago, here in the States, digital was 3% of our market. So if you look in Germany, it's about 3 to 5% right now. Well, I go, where's it going to be in 3 to 4 years? Is it going to end up being 50% of the marketplace? And, would I rather be indie then? I think what's going to happen is it's some smart person, hopefully. I know BookBub's expanding to England. Some smart people in these foreign markets are going to realize they can be aggregators for these indies, find the translators for them, do the marketing inside country, which is key, I think.
Yes.
Plus, Amazon really doesn't have their people in place in those countries. They were supposed to have a UK KDP rep. He quit. So I'm not even sure if they have a UK KDP rep right now. So we're sort of following where those companies are going, and those companies are a little uncertain too what they're doing there.
And I feel the same way. I mean, do you think we're just in that toddling phase, really? I mean, we're nowhere near mature.
We are, but we're where the United States was 4 years ago. Those of us who started out real early here, it worked out really well. So I'm kind of hoping those of us, I have a book in German, I have a couple of books in Spanish. They don't really sell at all, but I'm hoping, the problem is to invest $10,000 in a translation. Even Bella was like, yeah, I'm going to back off on that a little bit, holding off on it. And it's also genre. Romance writers are doing really well with the translation, especially in Germany. Thrillers, science fiction, the rest of us, the market's not there yet.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said that, because I've been looking at it going, oh, this is a lot of work. You almost have to start again. I have no platform in German.
Yeah, and I've even noticed now. I'm trying to think. It was Bella or somebody else is starting to tweet in German and tweet French, and Sylvia Day is doing that. But of course, she's got a big powerhouse behind her.
Yeah, I have done a couple of those based on what they gave me, but it is kind of odd. And then I guess talking more about business again, how can authors go from, being just an author to running a business as an author?
Well, I think you've always had to do that. Even successful traditional authors I know were running businesses. I mean, they really accept. I don't think actually what an author has to do now isn't that much different between a traditional and indie author. The only difference is the indie has to make more decisions and has more control. But we all pretty much have to do the same thing. You can be I know wonderful lawyers who go out of business because they can't run a business. They're very lawyer, but they can't run the business. And the same thing's true for writers. You've got to be an entrepreneur. And especially now the distance between me, the author, and the reader is the internet. So there's a lot of things that eat up, and it's really hard to explain to somebody. They go, well, how do you spend all that time? And you're like, I really can't explain it, but it eats up a lot of time.
It does, and I mean, and just circling back to the discipline, do you do like whole days on your fiction and whole days on business, or do you split every day?
Now, I try to write every day. I think you've got to put the writing first. You've got to really focus on it. Actually, you literally got to get to the point where you turn the internet off and just focus on the writing.
Yeah.
Because the internet will always intrude.
Yeah, I've been using Antisocial, the app that kind of turns off Twitter and Gmail, which is quite good. And then I wanted to ask you about the longevity thing, because obviously, you know, you've been in the business such a long time. You know, what are your tips for lasting?
You got to have. I use a quote from Terry Gilliam. You know, and you can't beat a Monty Python for a quote where he talks like making a movie, and he says, you know, to be a successful movie maker, he says you have to be stupid. He says you have to have like this mule-like stupidity, not listen to what other people are saying, just put your head down and do what you're going to do. Because there will always be people saying, you know, you're doing it wrong, you can't do it. That doesn't mean don't listen to people, but you really, truly, deep down inside, have to believe you're going to be successful. And success is different for different people, but it's really this stupid belief system that you're going to do it, even though logically there's going to be a lot of times where you look at the numbers and you look at what's going on in the future and what's changing in publishing and you go, you know, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm old now. I don't have time to do a second career, so I'm stuck in this. I kind of also believe in putting your back against the wall works really well. Where you absolutely have to do it, you do it.
Yeah, which is good. And I wondered about your because sometimes I just go and I feel like my head's exploding. It's all too much. And you have dogs, don't you? Do you go out walking with your dogs?
Yeah, we take them out every day. I try to do something physical around noontime every day.
Yeah, because I think that daily management of stress seems to actually be very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. People might think we are not stressed, but it is quite stressful.
Oh, it's very stressful. I mean, and I think the danger now, what really is bad is you can check your numbers constantly.
Yeah.
And you just can't get into that because it can be, you know, one day you can be like, oh, everything's great. And the next day, oh my God, it's all going to hell. And Jen and I will email back and forth. And I always say, you know, we're in it for the long haul. Consistency and long term is what we have to do, even though everything seems to be happening short term and fast.
Yeah, and it's trying to keep that view, and you almost have to remind yourself of it every day. That
Yeah.
it's not, and I have to tell my husband as well. It's not necessarily this month.
Right. Mhm.
But you recently wrote a great blog post on harsh truths for writers, which was awesome. And it said, you have to be ahead of innovation, not following it. I get rather bored lately reading blog posts and tweets, etc., because it's all the same stuff. And I totally get what you say there. But how can we be ahead of innovation?
Well, you have to, I call it catastrophe planning, actually. It almost sounds negative, but you got to ask yourself, you know, what happens if Amazon cuts royalty rates? What happens if Barnes & Noble goes under? What happens if, that's from my special forces background, where we always what if the worst possible scenario. And there's a couple of reasons to do that, which people don't really get. They think, oh, you only do that so you have a plan in case this happens. You know, we're talking about direct sales right now. In case Amazon drops its royalty rates, build our own website with a shopping cart and doing direct sales to our readers, making 100% royalty. But you also do it if you know you've anticipated all the bad things happening. It makes you a lot calmer. You know, when the housing bubble hit here in the States, my wife and I were watching these shows, and we're just amazed at these people who stand there and go, I never thought it would happen to me. And we're like, we always think it's going to happen to us. So we're mentally prepared for that. And I think you can read between the lines. Like, you know, one of the things I'm curious about now is like Scribd and Oyster. I didn't think those were going to work, but Netflix worked. You know, I remember watching Netflix thinking, I don't know if Netflix is going to make it. This, you know, DVDs in the mail, downloads are going to kill them. And they transitioned very well to downloads. So I'm kind of watching that going, you know, maybe subscription services are going to be very successful. Maybe that's something, you know, we need to look further into. Try to think, where's everything going to be a year or two from now?
Which is really difficult. And on that direct sales, I think a lot of us are thinking about that right now with the Hachette thing, and you know, it's just making us think. And so I've been looking at Gumroad and PayHip. Have you made a decision on that?
We did direct sales for about a year. We had a shopping cart, all of that. we stopped it because we were cannibalizing our own sales
Yeah,
and
that's
our
the worry.
rankings on Amazon. So right now it's just let's start looking into various programs to do that. We're not going to do it yet. We haven't decided to do it, but we are definitely looking down the line later this year, probably of maybe cranking it up. Um, just because, if your book's not ranked, if you got a ton of books that are just selling okie dokie, it can't hurt to drive people to the website to control them. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things people are doing. One thing with direct sales you can do, I mean, I know Cherry Adeo is kind of doing this, and I really haven't looked at it hard, but we're talking about this. The book you sell on your own website is actually an enhanced version. It's a different version of the book, so that way you don't get price matching. You're giving readers something extra on your website. We just launched we initially called it a sampler, now we call it a sneak peek of 42 of my books with the opening chapter, the cover, and an author's note about each book. Well, I'm thinking we could do that for every book, and it's a different book, actually, than the book on the other platforms.
Yeah, I had a look at that, your sampler. I didn't know you changed the name, but that's awesome. And for you, obviously, you've got you could do an author bundle as well, which of course I'm interested in.
Bundles, I saw them, and I think it was really great with the first people who did it. I'm a little leery. I mean, yes, you could hit the authors who do it. A lot of them say it was great, it was worthwhile, but you got to wonder what their goals were. Some of them were just to become New York Times bestselling authors. That's fine. Financially, I don't see it being that worthwhile. We bundled my Atlanta series, and even now I'm questioning, if someone bought the 6 books versus they buy the bundle, how much money are we losing? Versus would they even buy the 6 books? You're kind of like up in the air, balancing it out. We're continuing it, but I don't know. Bundles are 50-50 deal, I think. There's good things to it and there's negative aspects to it. So I don't think it's all, it's like everything else in publishing. Nothing has ever been all good or all bad.
Yeah, and the hard thing is you can't actually split test it at the same time because we can't have more than one thing on, you couldn't do a different cover or whatever because it has to be the same product.
Right. Yeah.
Which makes it so hard. And then you mentioned the Atlantis series there, and your fiction goes into myth and legend and technology, and does so many things. What are the themes that keep coming up for you in your fiction writing, particularly?
Actually, I think I did a blog post a while back called True Lies, where I had the 4 pillars of story. Let me see if I can remember them. One is my background, the military special operations. Another is history. I'm really fascinated by history. Myths and legends. Atlantis, Area 51 is a modern myth. And the other one is history. The brain. I focus on the brain. I find the mind very fascinating. So I got like Psychic Warrior. Even in my Atlantis books, a lot of it revolves around the brain, how the brain functions, what do we know, what don't we know, the conscious and the subconscious.
No, I find them really interesting as well, and I think one of the challenges for writers is choosing what you're going to write next, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, I'm finishing this book this weekend, and we have a pretty good idea, my wife and I, what we want to do next, which is totally, again, a standalone about the Berlin airlift, totally outside everything else we've done, but we just find that a fascinating story that's a lot of people have forgotten about.
Yeah, and do you go on research trips? Are you a traveler?
No, my wife and I, she was actually in Berlin when the wall went up. She heard Kennedy make a speech there. I was in the military, traveled. We joke that our hobby is story, and in the evening we pile in bed with the 2 dogs, and my wife controls the remote. I don't get to touch it. And I watch whatever she tells me to watch, and she's always right. We watch pretty much everything. We watch an unbelievable spectrum of shows because each of them gives us something, whether it's about character, the Housewives shows. I mean, those people are crazy, but you learn something about borderline personality and things like that from those shows. We watch old movies, we watch series, and we just analyze them.
I love that you emphasize TV as well, because we got rid of our TV like 6 years ago, and but recently we've been downloading shows because the TV is amazing. Like True Detective, we just watched True. I mean, that was good. Fantastic writing. The best writing right now is on cable TV, and that's what I tell people. And then I also tell people you got to watch it twice. Any series, we watched we watched The Wire probably 3 times, but we watched Breaking Bad twice. And the second time we watched it was much more interesting than the first because you already know what's going to happen, so you can actually see the writing. You can focus on we know they're setting something up down, and we know what it is they're setting up now on the second time around, so we can actually see those key points in the storytelling. Are you tempted to write screenplays at all?
I did, but Hollywood is. I know Sue Grafton got out of it. I always joke people go to Hollywood to suffer and Las Vegas to die. I mean, it's all about money, and we're just not that into it. It's a brutal business.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm gonna get the True Detective script because I just, from that kind of religious
Hmm.
supernatural angle, there's some good stuff in there, really good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, just before we go, just give people a bit of a spectrum on what is available from Bob Mayer in terms of books.
The Spectrum, my Area 51 series was 9 books. I'll never do that again because I actually arced a story for the first 7 books, which was incredibly difficult. But that's my best-selling series. Then I've got my Night Stalkers, which I pitch as the unit meets Warehouse 13. Atlantis was 6 books, but what I am doing is I'm rolling Atlantis into my Night Stalker books, combining them together. So that's going to be a lot of fun because I got parallel worlds and time travel, so you can do anything. But then on the other side, the thriller side, I got my Green Beret series, where I've merged my Horace Chase character from the Chasing books into Dave Riley and the Green Beret. So the 9th book on that will be out before the end of this year, Chasing the Sun. So those are my main 2 projects right now that I'm moving forward.
And your nonfiction?
I don't actually. I'm doing not working on a nonfiction book, which touches on what we talked about, called 7 by 7: The Anatomy of Catastrophe.
Hmm.
I'm taking 7 catastrophes like the Titanic, the Challenger, and I'm going to analyze the 7 things that would go wrong because we have a theory that any catastrophe requires at least a minimum of 7 things to go wrong.
Wow, can you do that about the publishing industry as well?
Oh yeah, and always one of them is human error. Any plane crash has to require 7 things to go wrong. My ex-wife was a maintenance test pilot, and always one of them. It may not be the primary cause, but human error. And to me, the big problem in publishing is people want things to stay the same. They're afraid of change. They want it to just, And I saw it in the Army because I was in the Army when we transitioned from the Cold War to the War on Terror. When we transitioned special ops, we were redheaded stepchildren, and then all of a sudden we're the darlings. That was not easy to transition. We had to really change the way we thought.
Wow. I could talk to you all day, Bob, but it's time for us to go. So
Okay.
where can people find you and your books online?
Coolgus.com is the best place. We've got a landing page for all my books, all the various platforms you can find on, and all our other authors too.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time. That was brilliant.
Okay, thanks for having me.